In 1876, a photographer whose name survives only as initials, REM, was commissioned to document a post-mortem portrait at Rookwood Cemetery, Sydney. The subject was an infant, 7 weeks old, laid to rest in a christening gown upon a carved stone bier near the cemetery's Anglican chapel. The exposure was routine. The equipment was standard for the period, a quarter-plate wet collodion camera requiring several seconds of stillness. But the resulting image was not standard. It has since become known, in archival notation, as the breathing infant. The photograph before you shows exactly what was captured that afternoon. A small child, centered in the frame, dressed in white lace that cascades over the edge of the stone surface. The eyes are closed. The hands are folded across the chest in the traditional manner of Victorian infant memorial portraiture. Dried flowers, likely jasmine, are arranged in a crescent around the head. The background is soft, slightly overexposed, showing the blurred outline of sandstone grave markers and a single eucalyptus trunk. Everything in this image is consistent with a deceased subject, except for one detail. The christening gown, directly over the infant's abdomen, is blurred. Not uniformly blurred, as a camera shake would produce. Not blurred at the edges, as a gust of wind might explain. The blur is localized. It sits in a soft, rhythmic distortion over the midsection of the child, and only there. The lace at the shoulders is crisp. The folds near the feet are sharp. The stone beneath is perfectly rendered. The fabric over the stomach appears to have moved, repeatedly, during an exposure that lasted between 4 and 6 seconds. This is Pass 1, the objective observation. A localized motion artifact in a region consistent with respiration on a subject documented as deceased. Let us now move to the archival record. The Rookwood Cemetery Trust transferred a collection of administrative documents to the State Archives of New South Wales in 1932. Among them was a leather-bound folio labeled Irregular Matters, 1870 to 1889. Entry 47, dated November the 14th, 1876, is a signed affidavit by one Mr. Thomas Alfred Harkin, identified as sexton of the Anglican section of Rookwood. Harkin states, and I will paraphrase from the original language, that on the afternoon in question, he was present during the photographic session. He describes the infant as having been examined by a Dr. Hargraves and declared deceased the previous morning. He then writes a sentence that has troubled archivists for over a century. Quote, "The gown did move upon the child's middle, as though breath were drawn beneath it, and this in a slow and regular fashion, which I observed for the better part of a minute before the photographer completed his work." End quote. Harkin does not claim the child was alive. He does not suggest exhumation or medical re-examination. He simply records what he saw. Movement, rhythmic movement, over the abdomen. And when you return your attention to this photograph, to the soft, impossible blur over the white lace, his words align precisely with the image. Now, skeptical explanations have been offered, and they deserve rigorous consideration. The first is wind. Rookwood sits on relatively open ground, and November in Sydney is early summer. A breeze is plausible, but a breeze does not selectively disturb a single 2-inch section of fabric while leaving the surrounding lace, the flowers, and the loosely draped edges of the gown entirely undisturbed. The second is camera vibration. A bumped tripod leg, a passing cart on a nearby road. But mechanical vibration produces linear or radial blur across the entire plate. What we observe here is organic. It pulses. The blur has a soft gradient at its edges, thicker at the center, feathering outward, consistent with a rising and falling motion from beneath the fabric. The third explanation is the most uncomfortable one. Premature declaration of death. In the 1870s, misdiagnosis of death was not rare. Infants, especially those who died of respiratory illness, occasionally entered states of profound torpor that mimicked death. Heartbeat and breathing reduced to nearly undetectable levels. Dr. Hargraves's examination, conducted without a stethoscope, which was not yet standard equipment for general practitioners in colonial Sydney, may have missed a faint, residual respiration. This would mean the child in this photograph was breathing, slowly, faintly, beneath the lace, and the camera caught it. Look again at the image, the closed eyes, the folded hands, the jasmine arranged with care, the soft sandstone behind. And there, at the center of the frame, that small cloud of motion in the white fabric, a distortion no larger than a playing card. It is the only part of this photograph that refuses to be still. There is one final detail that elevates this case beyond ambiguity. In 1904, a photographic journal based in Melbourne, the Australasian Photo Review, published a technical retrospective on wet collodion anomalies. The author, a chemist named Fenton Gale, included REM's Rookwood plate as an example of what he termed a sub-threshold motion capture. Gale performed densitometric readings on the original glass negative, which at that time was still held by the photographer's estate. His findings were specific. The blur pattern showed a periodicity, a repeating cycle of displacement, at a rate he estimated to be approximately 14 to 16 oscillations per minute. 14 to 16. The normal resting respiratory rate of a healthy newborn is 30 to 60 breaths per minute, but the respiratory rate of a severely hypothermic or moribund infant, one on the very edge of life, falls to precisely that range, 14 to 16. The glass negative has since been lost. Gale's measurements cannot be independently verified. The child was buried at Rookwood, and the grave, if it survives, has never been identified with certainty. What remains is this photograph, a christening gown in sharp focus everywhere except where it covers a small, still abdomen, a sexton's sworn testimony of rhythmic movement, a chemist's measurement that matches the breathing rate of a dying infant, and that soft, localized blur hovering in the center of the image like a question that was asked in 1876 and has never been answered. The Rookwood Cemetery archives do not record whether anyone, at any point, checked the child again before the casket was sealed. The affidavit simply ends. The photograph simply remains. What do you believe the camera captured that afternoon? A trick of wind and chemistry? Or the last, faint evidence of something that should have been saved? Leave your assessment below. And if this case unsettles you, it should, because the image is still here, and the blur has not resolved. It never will.